Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone to Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Bend. This is your host, Debbie Boone, and today I am so pleased to have my very good friend, Debra Hamilton, visit with us. Debra is the principal of Hamilton Law and Mediation. She is one of the good lawyers. Just kidding, friends that are lawyers. But she helps people resolve conflicts involving animals. She's written a book called, Debbie, tell me, it's behind me.
Nip in the bud,
Nip
not
in
in the bud.
That's
How
right.
do you use mediation to resolve conflicts over animals?
That's right. So I have a copy of her book. It's been sitting on my shelf for quite a while. I read it a long time ago when I first met her. But I offer her services a lot when people have disputes over animals, and she does a wonderful job helping conflict between pet owners and their veterinarians and the landlords and the pet owners and all other people who are fighting over a pet. To the detriment of the pet and probably their own detriment too. So, Deb, thanks for coming and spending some time with us today.
I'm so glad to be here because you've been so great about also referring people to me who are in conflict, who are in the animal industry, because we're all so emotional when we're in that animal venue. The things just hit us harder. So even though I focus on people in conflict over animals, I can also help people who are just in conflict who work in the animals. So those are the veterinarians, those are the groomers, those are the kennel, because if you're working in that venue, you usually have a very emotional reaction to different things. So I'm so glad to be here with you on the bend. And I really cherish our friendship because it really creates that ability to know, like, and trust people.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I always like to have people that I feel like if I'm going to send my client to you, I want to know that they're in good hands. So I feel very confident in referring people to my friend Debra. I always like to ask this question, like, how did you get started? What made you decide that you wanted to go to law and then not be a litigator, but then move into mediation? Because that's a completely different animal. No pun intended.
Well, that's the greatest question. And I answer it really often because I was a staunch litigator. I was an assistant district attorney. I wanted to be a lawyer. I was one of those kids. I wanted to be a vet at first, but then I hit math and chemistry and said, well, maybe I should be a lawyer and then I'll buy a horse. What I ended up doing, I became a lawyer and bought 3 horses. So I've loved animals my whole life. I have show Irish setters, long-haired dachshunds, and English Cocker Spaniels. And so I'm a breeder and an attorney, everyone's worst nightmare in the vet field. But I decided to shift from litigation when I had a case about a rescue dog who was pregnant and everybody sued each other. At the end of the day, my client won and got to keep all the puppies from the rescue dog, but nobody won. I mean, the dog thankfully won because it got to stay with the people it knew, but the rescue lost someone who had adopted from them 3 times. And the things that were said and the amount of money that was spent just made me crazy. So I took about a year off and decided to pivot completely from litigation to mediation, which is someone helping you, being a neutral, sitting in the room with you and the person you're having a disagreement with, helping you hear them and helping them hear you. Because most of the time, Deb, you and I both know, we finish people's sentences. We know what they're thinking. We know why they said it. And so we're going to go off on our own because this is what they really meant. This is what Deb really meant when she said that. Instead of saying, that's really interesting, Deb, could you tell me a little bit more? Could you explain a little bit more? Because you might be telling yourself a story that has nothing to do with what Deb meant or how she meant it or what she was even saying. So I now am practicing what enlightened lawyers would like to call integrative law, which is I weave compassion, empathy, and pragmatism into the law. Where what's going on here, Deb? Let's talk about it. Let's see what we can do so that we can maintain relationship. And if we can't maintain relationship, we can still wave at each other if we see each other at a store or driving down the road, or if you're in the same practice, or maybe go to a vet conference and see someone who you had a conflict with. So that's when I pivoted to mediation. And the mediation was not necessarily picked up by the powers that be in PLIT, because they want someone to sue before we have a conversation, which is sort of the antithesis to mediation. So I now help people have conversations confidentially in a mediation, or I help them take the negativity, be it the pet owner speaking to the vet or the kennel or the groomer, or I help the vet take the negativity out of how they speak, because that's what escalates the conflict. And if you can take a breath and learn those skills, it is, as you know, Deb, because you wrote that wonderful book about hospitality. It's about being able to breathe through your initial, are you kidding me? You just said that to me? I'm going to wipe the deck with you. If you can breathe through that and
Well,
just, Deb, tell me more about why you're
right.
so upset.
We always talk about being curious instead of furious, curious instead of furious. And that is what you talk about, and that is what I talk about a lot. And that assuming positive intent, that's the other part too. We make up false stories about the evil intention of the other person. And most
Well, it's
other
always
people,
evil.
yeah,
You could
they're always
be having a
evil.
bad day. You're always just evil.
That's right. That's right. Just because you didn't speak to me walking down the hall, then I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you? You didn't speak to me walking down. You must not like me. Did I make you mad? No, I was in deep concentration. I have a problem to
My
solve.
husband
That's
just
what's
called and told me that the cat or the dog knocked over a pot and he was upset about the
yeah.
mud on the floor. And that's what I was thinking
And
about.
that's what I was thinking about. That's right. It's not, it's not all about you, folks. It's really not. So, Deb, I'm curious, because this is all about the bends in life, but
Yep.
in switching all this from kind of this litigation assistant DA stuff into mediation, how did that pivot for you? I mean, this is, you're going
Oh,
from,
God.
yeah,
That
that's
was
a
the
big change.
most painful pivot. And I can honestly tell everyone that I was a serial mediation course taker, because it was so hard for me to stop talking and listen. I always knew what was best. I always would, and all of my mediation training, I finally gravitated toward a group called the Center for Understanding. I highly recommend anybody taking a class from them, because you don't have to be a mediator. You will learn how to listen better just by taking a course at the Center for Understanding in California, and they have them online and you can get them. I was on their board. I'm not affiliated with them anymore, but I have to tell you, I took a lot of mediation classes and pointed mediation classes for divorce or childcare or healthcare or whatever, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But that pivot was really difficult for me, because I was so engaged in helping people. And in mediation, it's a little bit of a twist. For a litigator, it's a huge twist. I need to help people find their own way forward, because if they own it and they recognize what they can and cannot do to move forward in a peaceful manner, can find a resolution that will work for them. Or if they don't, that resolution that you give them. So, Deb, I think you should do this and this. If it goes wrong, it is notorious that the clients will say, well, Debra told me to do that. And that's not what you want to do when you're having a conflict conversation. It's not well, we'll just agree to disagree. No, that sucks. That just continues that
That
underlying.
means I'm still going to stay in my silo of opinion,
Yeah,
and I'm
you're
not
the smallest,
changing
right.
anything. I'm still
So,
right, right? I'm still right.
Brene Brown, who you and I know
Yeah.
well, has this statement that she says, it's the story you're telling yourself.
Yes.
And you have to stop and say, the story I'm telling myself, Deb, is that you don't like me because you walked down the hall and you didn't say hello to me. Let me know if I'm telling myself a story that has grounding and we need to address it, or I'm off in la la land.
Yeah.
And you say, no, nothing. I just couldn't say hello.
Right.
So I found that this fed my soul better because I was helping people resolve conflicts in a way that enabled them to retain relationships. And to me, that was the biggest piece of the pie, retaining relationships.
So, Deb, in thinking about this, what do you think your biggest success was? Do you remember one that was just such a hot mess that you kind of helped them clear the decks for each other?
Well, it was the greatest success for me because it was my first case and it took me a year and a half to solve. And I didn't think I could ever solve it because they were stealing the dog out of each other's backyards in the middle of the night. Like if you let it out for last outs, they would steal the dog, right? And leave. And they were taking it over international lines because one lived in Canada and the other lived in Virginia. And they would drive and just sit there and wait. And it was a nightmare. And when we were trying to negotiate and mediate the terms of shared custody, because both of them realized the dog loved them, both of them wanted to get it right for the dog. But they needed to get past all the animosity they had with each other. So we probably 6 months in, we came to a decision, and I had this gut reaction that was like, this is not going to end well. There is no buy-in for one of the parties. I can feel it in my bones. They're lip servicing buy-in, but I can feel it in my bones. They don't have buy-in. So I said, I think, the mediator discretion, I think we need to take a week or two to sit on this and decide whether or not we can really abide by what the agreement said. And it took them 9 months to get back to me.
Oh my goodness.
And finally, they said yes. And the difference was at the beginning of our mediation, one of the parties would never come on camera. And I asked the other party, is that okay? And they said, yes, it was okay. And at the end, the other party came on the camera, which to me meant they had gotten to the place they needed to go to work together with the other party to share this dog. And to my knowledge, they have not let me know, but that was 14 years ago. The dog was about 2. That I think they're still sharing the dog. And what they have to do now, I think, is drive. They used to fly back and forth, but now they drive back and forth.
Amazing.
So that's one that it was one of my first ones. And I really thought there is no way in hell I'm solving this. No way. But
yeah.
But you have to with your gut, with everything that you do, especially if you make a bend in your life. I think you have to go with your gut. I know, Deb, we've talked about this when you were changing and doing different things and pivoting. You have to go with your gut in what you feel speaks to you, because you can stay where you are and be happy, or you can go where you should go and really help more people.
Exactly. Yeah. It's uncomfortable sometimes.
Yep.
So I always like to talk about how do people make decisions. So when you were trying to figure out, I'm going to leave my attorney life and go into my mediator life, were there obviously you took classes, but did you just kind of sit down with a list? Were you a list maker and say, okay, I need to do this? Or was it like, no, my gut is telling me that this is where I need to migrate because this is going to be more suited to my personality to do it, to be mediator?
So if you speak to my husband, I'm the worst person with lists. Don't hand me a list. I like to kill you if you hand me a list. So no list.
No list.
I'm a seat of the pants kind of girl. And every time I would venture into the arena of, well, let me help them make the decision, it would backfire. And I go, and that's why I'm where I am, because I need to learn. Every time I do one of these things, I learn more from my clients than they probably could ever imagine that I learn from them. They all thank me. They all think it's wonderful and blah, blah, blah. But I learn more because just the ability to, instead of tell someone what to do, have them get there themselves is so much more rewarding. So when I made this pivot, I wasn't the person in the room with all the information. I was the person in the room that assisted them in sharing the information as they could, so that everyone in the room had all the information and a better decision could be made based on the facts that everybody had. Nobody was holding back. It's a confidential situation. It's a confidential conversation. And you can't use it in court. I always say to the veterinary attorneys who tell me, but Debra, mediation, it's not really confidential. They can use it in court. I said, well, if they learn something in mediation that they can then go out and find and prove elsewhere or elsewise, I said, wouldn't you rather solve it in mediation so it isn't published? Think about that. Think about the fact that if you solve all of these things, a client, you can't ask them, but a client may not go and report to the vet board what they felt you did wrong because they feel you took accountability, responsibility, and were compassionate and empathetic to their point of view. So that's so much more important. And that's why they report people to a vet board, because they feel like nobody took accountability and responsibility. Nobody was empathetic or compassionate from my point of view. And so I'm going to go the only place I can go, which is to the vet board, and report you. And
Right.
if you don't wait to be sued, which never happens now because I'd rather go on social media, Deb.
That's right.
I'd
It
rather go
just
with social media and trash the person 8 ways from Sunday.
right.
So if you can take the bull by the horns, if you can just, stop, drop, and roll, which is in the book, you can create a process by which your success in diffusing conflicts is 98%.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always those fickle fingers that you get.
Well, I mean, you and I have had this conversation so many times about just getting everything out into the open. And I feel like so many times in veterinary medicine, the first thing that happens, especially with younger veterinarians, is when a client has a question, they immediately jump to the conclusion, again, that false storytelling, that the client doesn't trust them, that they don't believe that they know what they're doing, that they are questioning their medical skills. But sometimes the client just doesn't understand. And we often, because we live in this profession and we are deeply immersed in the medicine of it, then we assume the client knows stuff. And clients don't know squat. I mean, you're a breeder, and of course, I've been doing this 40 years, and the knowledge that people have about animals and anatomy and nutrition is so incredibly small, or sometimes it is just very wrong. And we are assuming that they know those things. And I talk a lot about the unfairness of it when we are judging others by our yardstick. We can't do that. We can't unknow what we know as a breeder, as a mediator, as a communication expert, as someone who's been in veterinary medicine for 40 years. So we have to be curious about where the other person is and not, use our smart diagnostic skilled brain rather than letting our limbic brain run amok, which is what happens when we start reacting to things. And, you and I both have talked about our frustrations with, we teach this stuff all the time. We teach it at conferences and we lecture, and how few veterinarians actually come to listen. Mostly it's the practice managers because they're dealing with client conflict or employee conflict.
Veterinarians, they're in the middle.
Yes, and the veterinarians usually are there in the middle of it, and they're the ones.
The veterinarians, no, the vet techs and the vet managers are in the middle of juggling all of these people who are killing each other.
Exactly, right. They're in between the two. Exactly, they're in between the two.
In my classes, I had a class that I gave, including clients in the team, and I had 6 people there because why would you want to include a client in the team? Why would you do?
Exactly.
And I'm like, because you have to include them. They might think they know everything. I always say to veterinarians when a new puppy buyer comes in with this ream of stuff that immediately you hate the breeder. You just it's like a Pavlov's dog. You see that, and don't give them this shot, don't give them that shot, don't do this, don't feed raw, whatever it is. And I say to the veterinarians when I give, like you do, these programs, I go, okay, so about the anatomy, the most recent drugs and the most recent things that are happening in your neck of the woods, and what you're providing information for your clients because you live in South Carolina, I live in New York. The protocols that I ask for in New York may be different than the protocols. And I just moved from New York to North Carolina, And I asked my vet, I'm a breeder. I said, I don't give multiple shots at once. I just don't do it. I won't. Interestingly, I gave multiple shots to my children, but not to my dogs. But that's a whole discussion that we will have some other time. But I said to her, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. And she said, well, we don't have too much of that, but we have rattlesnakes. And I said, excuse me? She said, we have rattlesnakes, and there is a rattlesnake preventative vaccination. It's a 2-shot vaccination. I live on a river, which probably is a beautiful home for rattlesnakes. We've had a few copperheads, skitter through our backyard. So for me, I said, yeah, that's what you and I help people do. We help them focus on having communication that supersedes what, me against you, but me with you. And
Right.
I often say, so you and I have talked about this. I talk to breeders as well and tell them, you are being your own worst enemy by sending this ream without your telephone number that says, please call me. But then I get to the vet conferences and the vets goes, why would I call the breeder? I said, you're absolutely right. It is such a pain in the butt to listen to somebody who is an Irish setter breeder for 40 years and has bred 7 or 8 Irish setter litters and has had every malady known to man happen to her litter, from HOD to parvo to this to that. And, what you want to do is you want to gain her expertise because she knows only about this line of Irish setters. And so you will learn what is something that is possibly endemic to her line of Irish setters. And she's going to share that with you. And the basic dog anatomy for all dogs.
For all dogs.
Maybe you can narrow it to sporting dogs. I'm not sure. But, the dog is the dog. But I only know about this line of Irish setters. And so I say it's not, like you said at the beginning, they always take it as if they're questioning their ability to be a veterinarian. No, I'm letting you know that I am totally in tune with this little thing that I just sold to this person. And I get it that you might not like raw. I get it that you might not like low protein. I get it that you might, but let me at least tell you why. Call me up and listen. I heard of it. I was on a call today and somebody said, it's like Columbo. He always asks curious questions. And I said, yeah, that's what we do, Deb.
That's what we do. We're asking the questions. Yeah.
We're standing there and we're asking the question, well, tell me, why is this so important? And then they'll say, oh, well, this is why. And then you'll understand why they did it.
There's logic behind it. Well, I can remember very well when my practice started working with the Greyhound Rescue. And of course, in North Carolina, we didn't have Greyhound tracks, but they were shipping them in from places where they were retiring
Universal
Greyhounds.
blood donor.
Yep. And they didn't have any hair on their butt. And so our doctors were like, gosh, is this some kind of skin? They're doing skin scrapes and stuff. And the guy from the Greyhound Rescue said, look, the reason they don't have any hair on their butt is, first of all, their hips are very wide and they put them in crates and they turn all the time and they rub the hair off their butt. And we went, oh, so that's the kind of stuff that is very unique that what we're talking about. So I had a Shih Tzu that actually was gifted to me from one of our breeders. And one of the things I remember her telling me is, don't pluck the hair out of their ears. And I went, okay, because as soon as you do, they get ear infection. Right. Now, and I just had this argument with my groomer about my Bichon. I said, don't pluck the hair out of his ears. And she said, oh, but they're nasty. I said, it's okay. I'll clean the ears. I'll take the hair and I will comb it out, but don't pluck the hair, because as soon as you do, I spend 2 days watching this dog spin in circles and rub his head on the ground because he's miserable. Don't do it. Every animal, just like every human, is unique, and we do a better job if we listen more than talk in most situations. And try to talk that to veterinarians about that too, is that we are, here to be a collaborator, not the authority and dictating down from on high. Yeah.
Take responsibility for what you choose to do, because my English Cocker that I bought from a woman who is totally into raw and into natural and into this and that, and no heartworm and no neck scarred and none of that. Because, well, English Cocker Spaniels tend to seize. They're one of the breeds that are affected by the medication. And I said, I get it, but I live on the river and
mosquito heaven. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she said to me, well, you're going to take a chance. I said, you're absolutely right. I'm going to take a chance, but I split them 15 days apart. And it's funny, when I got her, The vet looked in her ears and she goes, I think this is the cleanest English Cocker ears I've ever seen on a puppy. And I said, yes, and I'm about to ruin them because I'm not going to feed her raw. I understood that the
Mm-hmm.
diet she was on created the lack of ear infection in her ears. And when I would change her over to a carbohydrate, a balanced, I use
Mm-hmm.
freeze, I don't use raw. That I get put her on chow, I might risk having ear infections with her.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the conversation I had with my vet. And I go, I'm just not a raw person. My other dog eats some chow and eats some raw, freeze dried. I said, that's what I'm going to feed her. And we'll see how it goes. And, knock on wood, she has some dirt in her ear, but I shouldn't say anything because I'll force myself.
Yeah.
But her ears are good.
Yeah.
And I just clean them once a month and she seems to be fine. But you're right. If you're cleaning them every day, you're making them raw.
Right.
If you're doing stuff, you pluck their ears, ridiculous. And I just wish, and I know you do too, that both owners who speak with their veterinarian would be curious about why the veterinarian feels that way,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in your neck of the woods that creates this need by this veterinarian to advise you to do A, B, and C, and that the veterinarian would be curious about why your breeder who gave you this dog. I used to be really bad. I used to send home a document that said, in the event you feel it necessary to give this dog a triple shot, you're signing here to say you're going to refund the purchase price of this dog to the owners if something happens that causes a reaction in this dog because you told them to do a triple shot. And then they wouldn't do a triple shot because
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want to refund $3,000 to the purchaser of the dog. But I would, if something happened to the dog because you were splitting the shots
Mm-hmm.
and something happened to the dog, I would refund the money.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So I don't do that anymore. I'm not so passive aggressive as I was many years ago.
That's the
Must
lawyer
be,
in you. Did come out a little
that
bit,
was the
Deb.
lawyer in me. It must be that I'm a little more, neutral now.
Yeah.
But I really try to have breeders understand that veterinarians are trying to help their clients. Time is of the essence, as you and I have talked about. They don't have a lot of time anymore. So that building of relationship is so important and so fleeting. And, you and I work with veterinarians and their staff to figure out how to build that in the 5 or 10 or 15 minutes they have in
Mm-hmm.
the office. And, you and I are over 21.
Mm.
So we were part of the generation where the vet would come in and a half hour later, they would leave us and we'd talk about the kids and we'd talk about the dogs and we'd talk about everything. And, I think there are 10 of those vets left in the world.
Well, you're right. And I feel like that's part of the reason I wrote the book, because we do need to understand that the hospitality and that building connection and relationships, even though it seems that at first it's taking time that we don't have, that in the long run, when you're building trust with people, you gain so much more time in the long run because people are like, oh yeah, we've been through, several bouts of whatever illness or aging of an animal. And now we worked it through together. And I feel like I trust you and I know you very well. And so building those relationships is the key to a successful practice. And you can do it that way and actually enjoy your life as a veterinarian, or you can run people through as fast as you want, like meat through a grinder, and understand why you have burnout and upset clients and people fussing at you all the time. And that's just no fun at all. So,
Well,
Deb,
Ganella Peterson posted a really good post about emergency doctors, as I think they have it the hardest. They meet you on your best day, not in your best mood, not afraid, upset, emotional. And she helped a mastiff through bloat, not by surgery, but it was a risk. It was a huge risk.
mhm,
And she just communicated that to the owner
mhm,
in a way that was taking responsibility, accountability, understanding that the owner transmitted to them they don't have the money to do full-blown gastric surgery.
mhm,
And I could try this and it may work, but it may not. And, having had dogs who've bloated, because I have Irish setters, it's one of our nemesis, the next 48 hours are key because not only is the bloat difficult, and maybe the vets will correct me, but I'm pretty sure that the heart incidents after bloat are just as fatal, because they can survive the bloat surgery, but then they can die of a heart something because of the stress. So it's not like you're out of the woods when you do the surgery and you attack the stomach and blah, blah, or you release the torsion. You then have to wait. So this is a communication piece. And that's, I think, what you and I really strive to help owners ask for, veterinarians to provide. Just, I mean, if you have a chance, everyone who's listening to this, find Gunilla Peterson. She did a very vulnerable post about how she helped a Mastiff with bloat with clients who couldn't really afford full surgery in an emergency situation. So it wasn't like they knew her, and they had this long, relationship, and they
Right.
trusted. They were just hoping. But I interrupted you, and I apologize with your next
No.
question.
Well, I was going to ask you, because people look at your long career, my long career, oh, it's kind of this charmed life, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's 40 years of work to get to the success level that you're there. So what do you consider to be your biggest career mistake? And what did you take away from that? Because I think that knowing that, we goof up every now and then, lets people go, it's okay. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to fail.
I can honestly say that financially moving from litigation to mediation was huge. And I didn't realize just how huge it would be, because nobody wants to pay to have you help them have a conversation. They think you should just give that to them because you're a good person. Sort of like how veterinarians feel people want, advice from them or something for free.
Yes. Yes.
Rescue come and say, couldn't you just spay and alter all these cats for free? Well, that's what happened when I started my practice. Everybody thought, well, you don't want to litigate anymore. That means you want to work for free. Well, no. So that probably was one of the things that was a huge comeuppance to me, that people really didn't want to pay to find a peaceful solution. They would prefer to try the peaceful solution for free, but then pay to litigate, which of course, if you understand the dynamic there, I always say to people, if you pay me, say $2,000, I will save you $20,000, because we will resolve it without having to hire attorneys, do discovery, go through litigation, and then settle on the courtroom steps. So it'll cost you 20 grand to settle on the courtroom steps, or you can put your big girl and big boy pants on and do the $2,000 one. So my biggest mistake, I guess, was that I didn't realize the impact of a shift in my thought process. Because people, I mean, today even people call me, say, I want you to write a mean letter. I said, I don't do that anymore. Yes, but if you write a mean letter, you have a lot of this and that, and people will listen to you. And I said, I don't do that anymore. If you'd like that to happen, I have friends who I can introduce you to who will write mean letters. I don't write mean letters. And as far as clients are concerned, I have to say that most of my clients, I would say 95%, when they leave, they're better off than they were when they came to see me. I think even the people who you've referred to me, who we have worked together, and some of them we didn't resolve their
No.
issue. But yet they felt like they had a better handle on what they needed to do going forward, in a less adversarial way. And so maybe I don't get a resolution, but I help people find a better way to move forward, and they have more buy-in. And I think that is the benefit of having someone who acts as a neutral, who brings people together. I'm not a big proponent of, one party sitting in one room, the other party sitting in the other room, and I go back and forth, because then I'm the person in the room with all the information. And to me, that's a failure for me,
Mhm.
because, and in fact, when I was training to be a mediator in North Carolina, the mediators who were training with me found that to be the most uncomfortable thing that I did, keep everybody in the room together. Why didn't you break us out and just see what I wanted, see what they wanted? I said, because it's an agreement between all of you. What is this gamesmanship? Let's be honest, let's be open. We don't have to do this in, little increments. We can actually say, this is what we're going to do. So I think that was the hardest thing for me, is knowing that the income would be cut in like half
Mhm.
or more, and finding people who wanted to pay me for the entire thing and not just want to get the benefit of finding a new way to address something. And in the end, like we have talked about a number of times, the fact that people are living a better life because I help them really drives my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I try not to, and sometimes I succeed in not feeling like, are you kidding me again? But you know, if people are living a better life, especially I'm on the board of NAMV's Clear Blue, and if I can save a life, I think I've done a good job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for me, if I can give people the skills to address conflict in a more healthy and less adversarial way, then I've done a good thing.
Awesome. Well, one of the reasons for this show, as you know, it started during COVID, and it was people were basically they were concerned they were going to die any minute. But I've kind of changed the premise of the show for people who are bending veterinary medicine for the better. So I think your work with NAMV certainly is one of those things. And are there other examples of things that you've done? You also work with the Veterinary Legal Foundation. I don't know. There's too many acronyms. Yeah.
The American Veterinary Medical Law Association,
Law
which
Association. Yeah.
any of your listeners are not a member, they are silly geese. It's very inexpensive to join, and you get to hear the top veterinarian attorneys talk about how to survive in veterinary medicine. I mean, we have membership meetings once a month that have Jim Wilson and Bonnie Lutz and Lance Rosa and Rob Simpson and Jason, whose name is here, and I will find it. Oh, sorry, Jordan Tace. They're all veterinarians who either are attorneys or becoming attorneys, except for Bonnie, who's like me. She's just an attorney, but she's been a veterinary defense attorney for 200 years. I mean,
In California, where litigation
California.
is insane, the only alternate that is as
Right.
crazy as California would be to be in New York, which is where you
Yeah.
are.
Right.
And of course, Jim Wilson wrote the book on.
Everybody uses his book.
Yes.
So here you are, and you know, for the price of, you know, a month's worth of Starbucks, you can have the ability to write on the listserv, listen, I'm having a problem, what should I do? And somebody will listen to you. We've had so many more new members come. I was the president, full disclosure, was the president in 18 to 19, and from 23 to 20. Yes, Kenyon Conklin from Robeson Forensics is president now. Rob Simpson will be president next time. He's president-elect. It is a wonderful group. We give all the recent cases. So, you know, NAMV is my heart because I just want, I know that people commit suicide because they cannot find that way. And you do, Deb, too. They can't find the way to ground themselves. And they hide it so well, so usually nobody knows. And then all of a sudden they're gone and everybody's devastated. So if I can help one person reach out and ask questions and ask for help, fabulous. AVMLA is another one. And I also work in all the breed clubs to try to explain to them how they really need to talk to their veterinarians so that there's not this us versus them. Dr. Marty Greer and I are dear friends, and she and I we're supposed to do a program at VMX this year as a breeder and a veterinarian somehow for SVME. I'm on SVME's board as well, the Society of Veterinary Medical Ethicists, so I help there too. But it's a huge question, and it's a huge need because, quite frankly, breeders make the widgets that you work on. So if you're a veterinarian and you want to work on really healthy dogs, you really need to befriend breeders and have those breeders be the people who you educate the new things that are coming up. I mean, there's been huge discussions about brachycephalic dogs, and I'm like, you're never going to talk a breeder of 40 years of pugs, bulldogs, French bulldogs, you know, out of breeding their dogs. Yet, you know, if you're going to do a scientific experiment at a dog show, did you thank all the brachycephalic breeders who brought their dogs to be part of your research? No. And so for me, they are more than willing to participate in this if there's a give and take. You know, there's got to be that give and take. And veterinary medicine, I think, used to be a lot more client friendly than it is now. And that may be a direct result of the fact that clients are not friendly anymore. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It is tit for tat. I agree with you.
yeah.
But the point you make, and I do want to talk about the difference between breeders, real breeders, um, and the people who call themselves breeders.
Well, the breeders who are doing it as a cash crop.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cash crop people. I hesitate to call people puppy mills. I mean, it's how they feed their family and heat their home. So if you're that desperate and you need to breed 18 different kind of dogs, then now you can actually have misbreedings and call it a designer dog.
Right.
So then charge more for the dog.
Yes.
So when people come up to me and say, well, what do you think about the Irish Doodle? And I said, well, that's fine, but just ask the breeder of the Irish Doodle, who probably had a whoops breeding, but maybe not. If in fact they've done the health test on the poodle and on the Irish setter that the parent clubs recommend. Now there are some golden doodles and labradoodles. I mean, there's an Australian golden doodle who has its own registry, and it's not AKC recognized, but it's all sorts of whatever. And God bless them, let them go with God. Really, everybody should have the dog. That's my feeling. So I'm not a big, you need to get only rescues. No, you need to get the dog that fits into your life. I know that you have a lovely Bichon,
I do.
because that's the dog that would fit into your life. I have an Irish setter and an English Cocker Spaniel. Had I thought it through, I might not have gotten the English Cocker Spaniel, but that's a story for another day. But we get the dogs that we want in our lives. And I don't think anybody should dictate who, go to a shelter, because if you buy a dog from a breeder, then a dog in a shelter dies. I don't think so. There's never going to be that correlation. But you need to work with your breeders. If you have one of those cash crop breeders, as a veterinarian, you should gently suggest that they create some sort of a system whereby the parents of these dogs are somehow tested to make sure that they are at least, maybe have good hips, maybe have good eyes, whatever is the issue with that dog. Marty Greer, I guess it must be, you probably were there. I think it was AVMA. Marty Greer had a standing room only program where she went and talked to the Amish breeders about how to upgrade their breeding programs so that they didn't have the animal welfare people, parading with posters outside their farms. And they all took everything she said and implemented it. Because they just needed to know, listen, if you get your dogs tested, if you get your dogs, this is better. I mean, no, are they going to hold a dog in a place that is not property? As things are matriculating now, that dogs are going to be more than property soon, and veterinary medicine better get on the wagon. But I digress. There are people who are going to hold dogs as property and as, livestock, really, for some.
Yep.
Except for the French bulldog people, they definitely know they are a designer dog, because French bulldogs now come in colors that have never been seen and in coat textures that have never been.
The fluffies are there. Yes, we're like, oh,
they're Merle now, or they're
yes,
or they're purple. There's some that are purple. I'm like,
well, and some of them actually look grotesque because they are breeding them
so that their legs are very bent.
Yes, I saw one.
Breathing, they can't walk now, so they can't
That's
breathe.
right. So let's just make them a complete
and what if
anatomical disaster.
What a vet needs to do is just talk to them and say, have you looked at the breed standard in the National Club? Are you using that as your go-to? Because, people may not know that there's a way to breed a dog who's going to live a healthier life. And people are going to be repeat buyers, and you're not going to be sued all the time because the dog goes to the vet and has parvo, or goes to the vet and needs, the thoracic issues that happen with brachycephalic. It's a nightmare. So if you can educate, and I would highly recommend that, and this will be fun, that veterinarians find a local breed club for different dogs and go and talk to them about, things they should look for in this area. where you're living. If you're breeding a litter of dogs, we've had an outbreak of parvo, we've had an outbreak of lepto, we've had whatever it is. And if you're breeding a dog, maybe this is what you want to do to the parents before, because as you said, Deb, don't assume that people who are breeding dogs aren't just breeding them because they want their children to have the beauty of birth and, live puppies. And you know what? Those puppies come out no issues. I have to
That's
tell you,
right. It's true.
no issues. They're all alive. Nothing happens. The mother does everything. And you're like, I have this wonderful master hunter, champion, and she can't whelp 3 puppies. So you're like, how does that work? What is this like a
Yeah.
curse?
Yes. What is, well, yeah, it's kind of like, an Appaloosa horse. If you're breeding something for the spots on his butt, then you're going to have to assume that there's going to be some problems in other areas along the way.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we used to have some breeders that were excellent breeders, and we worked collaboratively with them all the time, and they did the health checks, and we did all the things. And that's how I ended up getting Merlin, my reject Shih Tzu, because he was cryptorchid, and
Yep.
he was a gift to me. So Deb, you and I met networking.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I met you, we were at a vet partners meeting. So let's talk a little bit about networking, because I feel like when people are listening and they're trying to build their career and they're, maybe feeling a little stuck, that they're like, okay, what do I do next? I don't even know what's available next. And so let's talk a little bit about what you consider to be the value of networking and how it's benefited you in your career path.
Well, I think that you can go to a big conference. You shouldn't necessarily sit with all your friends, because that isn't a really good way to network. You can go with your friends every once in a while, but you really need to talk to the person next to you who you don't know. You should probably go to your school's program if they're offering one. Like VMX has a bunch of universities that have alumni programs, and that way you can get to know older and younger. You can join someplace like Vet Partners, which is a little expensive for a new vet, but like AVMLA or SVME, being able to join those groups. Oh, there he
There's
is.
Tucker. This is Tucker. Yeah.
Tucker. There is a group out there for you that you can gain information and also gain an ability to be a collaborative partner with. So I always say, and I'm sure you do too, if I walk away with 1 or 2 really good connections, like today I was on a North Carolina mediator Zoom. It was a round table with a bunch of longtime mediators, and there were 2 people who really were interesting. So in the chat, I said, I loved what you said. I'd love to grab coffee with you virtually. And both of them said yes. And, I gave them my email. If they get in touch with me, great. If they don't, well, then it wasn't that magic connection that I thought it was. However, I can always find them, but you really want to be, it's not the number of people you meet and say hello to.
Mm-hmm.
It is the kind of connection that you make. And I wouldn't go into it with an eye toward what can they do for me. I would go into it with an eye toward what can I bring to the table for them. So you're a recent graduate. These people have been in the business forever. We're starting a mentorship program, I think, in AVMLA. And I said I will only help work on the mentorship if the mentors agree to be as much of a sponge as the mentees. Because if you talk to Danny Rabwin or you talk to Addie Reinhold, who have some of the premier mentorship programs in the business, 2 people everyone who listens to this should know and should become familiar with. They both are outstanding. Whichever one speaks to you better, join them, because mentorship is key, whether you're old or young. Whether you've been in it for a while, because sometimes I know this doesn't happen to us, Deb, but you get stayed, you get stuck in
Yes.
your
Yes.
mud.
Yes.
And you really need somebody to kick you in the ass and say, hey, what about this? Or what about that? So if you're fresh out of school, you're the person who's going to kick them in the ass and say, well, what about this, in a nice way?
Mm-hmm.
What about this? Or what about that? We learned this at school. I know that there are a lot of statements being made now that, kids coming out of school, vet school only know the gold standard. They don't know the seat of your pants medical work that was done to help people and their dogs or cats or horses or whatever you are involved with, pigs, cows, get the best veterinary care you can afford at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a hard conversation to have. You and I have talked about this. It's a hard conversation to have with an owner when, yeah, it has cancer, it has osteosarcoma. Its leg may or may not be broken yet, but it probably will break. Will we cut it off? Won't we cut it off? What is the outcome? What should we do? Is there chemotherapy? That's a conversation to have so that you can create education, as you said. Don't presume education in force, which they don't have, but also give them the opportunity to feel good about the choice they make. And case in point, I had an Irish setter who broke her femur. I had talked myself into the fact that she had blown her cruciate. And so when I went to the vet, I was totally sure at the Adult Medical Center that he was going to come back and say, yeah, cruciate, we'll just sew it up. You'll keep her in a crate, blah, blah. Everything's great. Yeah, no, it was osteosarcoma. And I had sworn, because osteosarcoma is the nemesis of Irish setters, and a number of my friends had it, and some of them, most of them, had cut the dog's leg off. And so I'm a purist. I apologize to anyone who finds this disheartening, but I can't explain to my dog why she woke up with 3 legs. I haven't been able to figure out how to do that. I can't ask her, do you want to walk around on 3 legs, or would you like to just go? And dogs live in the moment. So I am always the one who says, I'm not going to do that because that's about me. It's not about her. Now, I have a dog who's 15 now. And the owner said, we'd really like to try. She had some cancerous tumors. She was 14, cancerous tumors. And I said, you're going to open up a 14-year-old girl and take these tumors out. And so I said, my vote would be, but I'm only one of 3, so I lost. And of course, she's doing great. She just celebrated her 15th birthday. But the vet with the osteosarcoma was the nicest vet I had ever met. And I didn't know him from a hole in the sidewalk. I mean, he was just the vet on call at the Animal Medical Center who took care of her. And he said, the decision you made was that you wanted to take the Daisy you brought in home, because if we had done the surgery, it would have been a different Daisy you took home. So you had to be comfortable with the Daisy you would take home. And I thought that was absolutely, at least for me, very grounding for me, that I'd made a choice about the Daisy I wanted to take home. And of course, we let her go, and she was only 9, and she had no other sign of cancer. So, yes, I probably could have had another year. But I thought that the best way for her was to let her go. And of course, Athena, the warrior princess, came through the abdominal surgery with flying colors and is still walking 1.5 miles at 15. Go figure. And I'm so glad they did it. So these conversations are so important, Deb, to have. Going back to what you started with, is that don't presume people know what they're talking about or know what's available, and do it in a way that is curious and educational, not, are you that stupid?
Years ago, I had a conversation with Dr. Tom Catazano. He goes by Tomcat. And he was an old consultant. I remember going when I was a manager, listening to Tomcat speak. And what he said really struck me. He said, when veterinarians, especially the boomer generation and older, were trained in veterinary school, they were trained as livestock veterinarians. And they assumed that the people who owned animals knew basic husbandry because the animals were their livelihood. And he said, now we have people who are animal owners who have no husbandry skills because these are not their livelihood. They're impulse buys many times. They're part of their extended family. They got them because somebody else had one. They thought it was cute, and so they ended up with it. So we have to change the way we communicate with people and never make the assumption that people know some very basic things about taking care of an animal. And over the years, I've seen that to be incredibly true. And some of the fun stories from my classes with receptionists or the questions that people will ask us at the front desk, say, for example, and you may have run across this, is you have a male and female who are neutered, who are siblings, who breed. And then the owners are astounded because they were siblings that they did that. Like, they're animals. They really are not human
They really
beings.
don't remember that they're brother and sister.
That's
And
right.
quite frankly, in the wild,
It
the only
was,
way that doesn't happen is because there's an alpha male and an alpha female.
yeah,
That's how that doesn't happen. But it'll happen if it's just a boy and a girl. Yeah.
that's exactly right. Exactly right. So we have to really consider how much people don't know. And even though they will sit in our exam rooms and nod their heads in agreement that they understand everything, they will turn around and come up to the receptionist to ask for clarification. And the receptionist is the interpreter. So
Yeah.
train your receptionist well, let's put it that way. All right, Deb. Well, I appreciate our time. We have talked a lot and we've had a good time. But I always like to ask a fun fact, a secret talent, favorite song, something people might be surprised to know about you.
Well, I always give this as my fun fact because it is really incredible. I was the person who wrote the governor of the state of New York to ask him to allow female lifeguards at Jones Beach in New York to be able to take the ocean tests, because up until 1977, 76, 77, women were not allowed to be ocean lifeguards.
Oh my goodness.
And so I said, well, this really stinks because, first of all, we made less money because we were pool lifeguards. And if you've ever lifeguarded a pool, you want to shoot yourself because the noise and everything is incredible. So I was the person who wrote the governor and just asked the governor, can we just take the test? Will you let us take the test? And the governor said, well, sure. Under Title IX, I wrote this whole thing because I think I took a Title IX class in college. I was a freshman in college and I took a Title IX class. So I said, I knew everything. I knew
Yeah.
everything. So I wrote this letter. And they let us take the test and all the women passed. And then they didn't know what to do with us. They were like, what? What, you passed? So when I go to Jones Beach now and I see all the women on the lifeguards on the ocean, on the guard stands, I go, you're there because of me. I never walk up and say that.
Mm-hmm.
I say, you're only there because of me, because I wrote that letter. We got to take the test. We all passed. And now you can take the test. So that's a fun fact that, and that was
I love that.
1977.
Yeah.
Holy, I was 10, maybe I was 9.
Oh. Yeah. We've come a long way, baby. That's
Yes,
right.
we have.
We have.
Yes,
We have. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a wonderful conversation. We've wandered all over the place, which is always the fun part of these
I love
episodes.
chatting with you, and I love the people who listen to your bend, because it really is about making, the decision to do what you'd like to do, going with your heart, and knowing that if you do follow your heart and you work hard, everything works out. And maybe it's not the first pivot you make or the
Right.
first bend you make,
Yeah.
but it's a bend and a bend and a bend. And then you get there and you go, how did I get here? But then there you are.
Yeah, there you are. And it's a great place to be. Well, thank you again. And thank you to the audience for listening to this episode of The Bend. We will have all Debra's information in the show notes and how to reach out to her. And if you do have a conflict dealing with animals, she is your woman. She has helped me with many of my clients and some interesting cases that somehow I got involved in no way, shape, or form knowing how, but there it was. And so I sent them to Debra and she took care of folks. So thanks again, Debra. And thank you very much to all the audience of The Bend.